the experience started, so I took the mushrooms. At first, I laid all the mushrooms down, right? And put my left hand on it, and I had an intention of stating my intention almost like a prayer towards the mushrooms. I said, if I would love to be in touch with my spirit guides, potentially my dad, universal knowledge, and just I would really like even another entity of knowledge out there that maybe isn't human, and that's what I would like to encounter during this journey. And so after I said that in my mind, I then ate the mushrooms just as its form, not in a tea or anything like that. Followed up with water, and the facilitator and I did a breathing exercise just so I could kind of get in a meditation mood. And so we did the breathing exercise, and I could feel it subtly coming up already. And it should take about 30 minutes to actually feel it, but it was pretty sudden for myself. And so I was feeling that, and once the breathing exercise was done, I said, okay, I'm ready. Like, I'm feeling the mushrooms now. So I put on the eye mask and I put on headphones, and it's her playlist, so it's music. And so it's a very internal journey.
Oh, wow.
And I was immediately seeing some visuals that were like waves, almost like waves of light. And this was against a black background, so just seeing like grays, whites, kind of in waves. And then the music started kicking in, and the visuals became more intense, like Aztec visuals, and it started really moving around in patterns.
Do you mean Aztec as in Aztec, South America Aztec? What do you mean by Aztec?
Well, like Aztec art in a way. So you see like shapes. Actually, let me show you. Then it just became super intense all of a sudden. And so I really was like, I think thrown off guard by how intense the experience was and how fast it was coming on. And so I asked the facilitator if she could put her hand on my arm. Mm-hmm. And so so she came over and put her hand on my arm because I needed that anchor, I needed that support. And so she did that, and I don't know at what point where the fear kind of went away, but the fear went away soon after that. And I still was getting the Aztec visuals, and then I started feeling a warmth in my heart, like my heart space, and kind of this radiation warmth, and it extended throughout my body, so it started growing. And the deepest part of my experience, it's hard to remember exactly chronologically what happened, but I definitely became enveloped in this warmth, and I felt as if I was inside of a shell, like an egg, and then a womb, so like kind of one and the same. So I felt that I was in touch with the feminine energy, and like the ultimate feminine energy. And so I felt as if I was in a shell, and when I was laying this way, I could really feel the radiation right here. If I opened up right here, it could feel like I was coming out of the shell or breaking out of it. And then when I was leaning over this way, it was more of that warmth again. And so I really, really enjoyed being in that space of that feminine warmth. It was like the sun, it was like a sauna times 10. It was like that warm, but I wasn't sweating. And so I was feeling that and just really loving energy, and I really loved being there. And at some point, I broke out of that and became more of like an air type energy. And so I couldn't feel my body, and it was more of that masculine energy. So I thought of my dad, and I was smiling because I wanted to be in touch with my dad, but I never saw him physically in any form, and I never saw anyone in any form. When I thought of someone, it was their energy. It wasn't their human form. And so it was almost like it was their true self in a way, or maybe even their spirit that I was being in touch with energetically. And so I thought of you in all of our conversations, and it was the same type of nodding and approval of like brotherlyhood, that kind of thing, doing the right thing, truth, and all those feelings were in that moment. And to me, that was very masculine energy. And so I went from the feminine to the masculine, I believe. And then I became at some point like turtle energy. And so I felt really, really tired and really old. And I felt as if I was just tired of experience, or tired of everything, just all the baggage of experience and things like that. I felt like I was done with it. So I imagine, when we grow old and all of this experience and we're just ready to let go, it was almost that feeling. And so I imagine myself as a turtle returning back to that feminine heat. And so within that, being very old and very tired of things, it was like a turtle resting its belly on a warm rock. Like, and I think your book says something like
Lazy
that.
lizard.
Yeah, exactly.
The
Yeah,
warmth of a.
yeah. So it was very much like that, except I was like a turtle, and it was that same warm feeling, the feminine energy, as when I was inside the shell. Except this was symbolic of death, whereas I think the shell was symbolic of birth. But it was going to the same place. So I feel like what it taught me was that place we always return to, whether it is like the sun's energy or whatever it is, it's the feminine. And so I feel like there's a universal principle of feminine. With birth, we come from, we're baked inside of it and we come out of it. And then in death, we go back to it. And we're happy to be enveloped by that energy. At least that's what I felt during the experience. And so those were the biggest takeaways. And I had some other experiences where I was like dancing to the music, but like my energy body, I wasn't dancing in person necessarily. And so I felt very freeing at points in time, almost like a child who just runs around and plays. There's that essence to it too. And breath, I remember breathing in and my breath was just so expansive at one point. It seemed endless. And also with the music, I heard there was periods of times where it was like Om and like Shanti. And so anytime I listen to that in music, I always kind of just like pass it by, like, oh, it's a cultural thing, like Oms and Shantis and all that stuff. Like maybe that's just the Hindi type stuff in music and all that thing. But when I heard that, it felt super ancient, like super ancient. I got a sense of it being really, really old. And I don't know what exactly that means, but hearing that voice seemed super ancient at the time.
Well, you know who Walter Steiner is, right? When he started the Waldorf schools. Well, he was in the early century here. And are you aware of Robert Greene, polymath?
Yes, you mentioned him. I looked him up. Yeah. He talks a lot about Hermes Trismegistus and thought and all those things.
And Robert Greene was a studier of Steiner, Rudolf Steiner, not Walter, Rudolf. And it's the first time that I've heard it confirmed, that I've known since I was your age, basically, that, and back when I was your age, so this would have been, like, say, in 84, 83 back then. I was 29, you're a little younger. But it came to me, not then at that time, but here and now at this time, and in the elongation of this time, and this is what I mean by the precipice of the leap in regard. So to put, and what Steiner had said at the turn of the century, when we come to here, the old souls that have been in the human experiences, that have elevated themselves through the lessons of learning, the unconditional love versus bitterness or judgment, and would reincarnate as a soul group, and we would come together at the tipping point mass. And so, and it wouldn't be through choice. It would be through choice at a certain place of choice, but it would be frequency that would align it. Because if you take a magnet, you put it in sand, and you got all these gold flakes, it's not choice that they come, it's through the frequency of the alignment of the magnetism. I've always believed that. I've lived my entire life by that there would be a tipping point, a precipice, where the souls, the Platos, the Socrates, the Muhammads, the Jesus, to me, the heroes are the ones that I do not know, that really held the fire and the flame in a manner that were never made famous, never written about, their books were burned and so forth. There's an underbelly in the Mycelium Network in that manner that I've always believed there would be a star come over, there would be a certain point, and they would start here in Europe, over here in Australia, and then that would come together as a commutative force field that would make for the tipping point in relation of. Now, with the sacred male and female principle, all you got to look at in the longevity of history is the toxicity of authoritarianism, the toxicity of the bottom of the Vatican, the toxicity of religion. I sent you over, that was actually entitled God on Trial, where I go back in my studies and I see the domination of religious over the belief system of the natural ability for us to get together in humanity, the divisiveness, the divide. And so in regard to the letting go of the being tired and the disappointments, and we have cherished outcomes, and cherished outcomes are a recipe for disappointment. That's what cherished outcomes are, because we will elongate into the future, the Tony Robbins seminar, we will have hopes, dreams, and otherwise we'll have a vision board, and it won't happen in regard. And so the earlier that we can recognize that we're in perfect time for whatever transpires in regard to that, then we're in a place of opulence and blessing in regard to that. And so we let go while we're still adjusting in a real world of mortgage business. We're still adjusting in the reality of the human body and consciousness. But my premise on that, in regard to that tiredness, that burden, I always see things from the microscope automatically. That I see in the grain of sand, in the bubble in the ocean, the entirety of the beach, the entirety of the ocean. It's all the ingredients exist in the microcosm as the macrocosm. And when I met you, your voice, and then we rock and rolled, but I'm a rock and roller. And so I say, don't take that personal, because the next time I'm on the phone, I'm going to just hit it out of the park again. I'm a rock and roller. But I knew that, but I'm also a mathematician. I also have, whatever it's worth, what astrology means to me, and 1,000 hours since I was 40, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of birth charts that I've looked at, that I've never spoke to time, space, Leonardo da Vinci, it doesn't matter, time of Christ, it doesn't matter, the Bach 10, 5,150 years ago with the Mayan calendar that they said was to close on December 24th of 2012. I go time travel back and forth in silence. And so it's all simmering inside of me, so I draw my own conclusions in regard to my reality, and then along the way I'll find places of high confirmation, like with the Rudolf Steiner, that we've come together unbeknownst to us, unless that's that inner voice that calls to us, the call of the wild within us, that we recognize that we've planted ourselves here purposely for a particular reason. And that's the reason of the tipping point in regard to the technology, the AI intelligence, the political regimes that have to be undergone in a manner of transformation of non-authoritarian into a democracy. We've got to be colorblind in regard to the race, religion, and the color of the skin. And so before that could happen, it would be a crashing, bursting of the atom to where it would emerge from. So there's an emergence factor reality to where it's happened over the last couple hundred years, but it's happening quicker and quicker, the acceleration process, reality checkpoint. Now, what I have for verification of me is the astrological ingredients that the new tribe is being born under, as opposed to where I was prior and so forth. The outer planets, Pluto, 248 years, though that turn of the wheel, that turn of the cycle, that turn of the clock, the turn of the fate. And that's kind of my message that I preach in regard, because that's the message I adhere to. I don't see me much as a player in regard to it. I just see me in my reality of my awareness of it. Because my reality of my awareness of it really goes back to my teens and prior to puberty. And so I can look back at my life and I think, wow, I've just never changed. I've just believed the same thing since I knew how to think. I've always just thought the same thing. And my life's been a hellhole, the turbulent reality checkpoint to not have me think what I think, but that's what it is that I know, and so that's what I come back to my regard. And so along the way, I'll meet people, and then I'll have my own assessment, is where do and how can they fit into the greater picture? Release the I, me, mine into the we, us, ours. And so I have the point checks along the way, and then I will hold, and I've been correct except I had to learn the reality of narcissists, which is an entirely different subject, incredibly dangerous in how they can fool the empath in a manner of servitude, suck the soul of them, the energy force field, and leave them splattered on the ground in regard. It's a really real spiritual battle between the narcissist and the empath. The narcissist shows the empath the spine within them, the boundaries set for them, and the empath shows the narcissist compassion irregardless. And so that place has got to meet in the middle at a tipping point reality to where birth has come from that place of neutrality in consciousness, so forth, the valley of the death, the dark night of the soul.
So, do you feel like narcissism is taught, though, in our society?
No.
No,
No, there's narcissistic traits, aptitudes, behavioral patterns. Narcissists are created. Narcissists are created through abandonment, abuse, childhood separation from the mother. Narcissists are created. Hitler, smart guy, he separated all the kids at birth from their parental. And so there's an isolate cocoon in regard to the survival instincts only, and then there's a present time of the call of the wild, the primal, that they operate from. And so they don't have compassion and an awareness of self-awareness. They only have the moment that they're interactive completely in regard to. I am extraordinarily familiar with the creation of a narcissist because I was created as a narcissist. My first 2 years, I was raised alone. I have siblings, a year older, a year younger. I was raised alone in a room. I wasn't allowed to see anybody, including my mom, only to breastfeed and then not at all. Then I was thrust into an incredibly abusive childhood circumstance situation in regard to that. I know the depths of darkness in the matter of where, had I chosen along the way, that I could have put myself in a place of an incredible domination over others. I chose a life of solitude and a path away from it, and I wrote An Angel Came, struggling through my 20s in regard to, and I had a pact when I came here, if I go bad, snuff me out. And I've lived by that creed from day one, because when you actually are, and you don't have the love of the sacred female, it lasts until the day that you're dead on planet Earth. There's an awareness of reality. And I just came into the study of narcissism, Carl Jung, the deep psychology, just a couple of years ago, because I got really slam dunked just a couple of years ago. And I'm like, wow, I just never saw this coming. How can I be so blind at my age that I could be taken under so easily? But then I discovered it. But I'm aware that we all have a compass that points north. We all have a God seed within us. We all make our own choices in regard. When we lie to ourselves or to another, we're aware of it. Irregardless if we say that lie again and again to have us believe that it's actually the truth because we've forgotten what the truth is. We do perpetuate our own compass in regard to the north, that it points where we go off the exit that wasn't on the map that we were following. I am a firm believer in that. And I'm a firm believer, I can only have my life as an opinion of life, but I'm a firm believer because everybody has a story. And whatever that story is, what is going to be, wherever the Achilles heel is within one, is going to be snap broken in regard to growing again. Whatever that snake is, it's going to shed its skin. Whatever the phoenix, the rising from the ashes, that will happen and happen again. Whatever ladder step that we're on, that we think that we finally climbed that mountain of the Jacob's ladder, it's only a step above. I have lived a life within me, the observance of reality, my opinion only, that's what the human experience is. And going back prior, the Garden of Eden, the biblical, the Anunnaki, the Sumerian records, there's a constant in them where pre-Diluvian there was a dominant factor that was a hybrid interrelationship with human. And Zachariah Stitchkin, The 12th Planet. There's a few books that I want to share with you to read. The 12th Planet that's a sealed sun deal. It was written in '76. The Spear of Destiny. One question I had in the 4th grade, I was forced to watch black and white Holocaust of the Jews in the ovens. To this day, I have nightmares of it. And so I always wonder, and I'm German, I always wondered, how could Germans, they make the Rolls Royce, they make the BMWs, they make Mercedes. These are really smart freaking people. Germans are. German Shepherd. And so all my life I was always curious how that could have happened. And when I came upon the Spirit of Destiny, another book, I discovered in Revelation the principalities of evil. We don't fight against flesh and blood. We fight against principalities of evil. That's one nice thing about hallucinogenics. You come out of the flesh and blood, and you recognize the as above, so below. You're working with a higher power that's not in body. And so the Spirit of Destiny, and the other book, The Lucifer Principle, because you asked a question, a really good question. How can human do that to another human? That's a real reality that we really need to get the base level regard, and it's taught, because we by nature are not carnivorous one to another. And so, and what I've learned about the apple tree, what I've learned about the dog, what I've learned about society, the wolverine, the elephant, the lion, we all have an intrinsic place within us of the sacred female in the love in regard to us. If we adopt a lion cub at this moment and we keep it for 20 years, that lion cub's not going to turn on us if we do it right. There is a symbiotic relationship, Mycelium Network and above, where we're all connected in the unity of one. It's fact. And so whatever that threat was, back to the Anunnaki, back to in the Anunnaki, whatever that threat was, because one came here, two brothers, to serve and Thoth, Trigmus, Emerald Tablet, yeah, that in service of, the other in extraction from. And so that's been the equal and opposite between the narcissist and the empath. So I track it back to there, because those brothers were against each other in regard to what shall we do with human. And there was, when the sons of God came upon the daughters of men, that's right there in Genesis, Sumerian records, Mormon, it doesn't matter, all the way back, that's what transpired in the hybrid reality. And so that's where I get my theory, philosophy of where technology came from, because I didn't come from these trees. These trees, my dog, everything that is human orientated, the origination of the birthplace of human cannot go outside the laws of human, that being the gravity sphere. We as human can. So there's a hybrid insemination making it possible to avert the laws of gravity in regard to the human, primate, monkey.
It makes sense when you talk about it that way. I haven't myself studied Anunnaki.
I know
yeah,
this. It's so, you're so fascinated to talk with, because even in regard to politics, and even in regard to what you sent me with Israel and Palestine, that really struck a nerve, especially years ago when I was more availed to it, but I'm availed through it biblically, because I'm availed through it through the 12 tribes of the Israelites. I'm availed through it in regard to the Israel being the chosen ones and all that bullshit, quite frankly, because we're all chosen ones and we're all seeds of God and we all have the potentiality of life within us and the continuing life of us. There is no separation, color, skin otherwise.
You mentioned, or I've heard, the only race is the human race, right?
Correct.
Right.
The only race. And this whole thing with the human race, first off, we're not running against each other. We're human beings that are caught up in doing. Don't fake it till you make it, be it till you see it.
Yeah.
We're human beings caught up in the aspect of doing. And that doing and that cherished outcome and that future dream of an expectation that we put judgment on, and then a disappointment when the calamity arrives. We're offset in regard to the naturality of us living the life force within us that's in present time. The dog lives in present time. The trees live in present time. That tree, when it was young, did not fret upon which limb to grow next.
Yeah.
I don't believe they think like that.
Right.
I don't think they worry about how tall I'm going to get. I don't think they're jealous of the tree beside them.
Yeah.
I just don't think it happens in that manner. And I believe they're conscious. And so I've never thought of human as a superior species. We can't even get along with each other. How superior can we be? When you see dolphins or birds of a feather that flock together, and the premise for me in that reality is that we have a hybrid insemination crosswire within us, that we're not able to avail the dark side and the place of the whatever transpired. And the story goes with the planet Nibiru, and it's a 1 to 3,600 ratio, and it was that the primate monkey had the same DNA available to experiment and make for a workforce in regard to. And what they say is they came to mine gold. And I always had a question, why is so gold important? Well, one thing, years and years and years later, they discovered that gold will patch up the ozone. And the story goes that in the planet Nibiru, their ozone layer was faltering, and so they had to patch it. Now, whoever that this was in regard to the extraterrestrial species is far more intelligent. If you think about where we are in regard to technology, military armament, AI intelligence, and things we don't know, CERN, the things that we don't know about, because our brain isn't functioning in that manner. We haven't studied, and we're not that where we've degreed ourselves in manners to where and otherwise. That, in my opinion, is not natural intelligence. If we had abided by natural intelligence, because think about the budget militarily that from one country to the next. Had we put 1/100th of that money in compassion, money in differences, if we lived in a manner to what is the best educational system, what is the best healthcare system, if we had an equality in regard to the human race, we would live together easily. And so here's where I am with the sacred female principle. The sacred female principle, the mothers of the children that go to war and the kids are dead and they become war heroes. Those mothers would exchange that factor in reality where the father instead goes to war now also and becomes the hate that he's hating upon and the hatred that he's usurped into. And the mother cries alone and has nobody to talk to, and her son is dead. And so we've got thousands of years of that reality check factor to we make heroes of those that were thrust into a war that they didn't create and was a war of their fathers in regard. And the hatred and the bitterness and the division and the lines of enmity and separation, and I, me, mine, the king's throne that I sit on. And so the melting pot and the America as a experiment in democracy is all brand new in history. There's always been kings, there's always been rulers, there's always been blue bloods, it's always been I'm a carpenter because my dad was a carpenter. My dad's in the military, so I'm going to the military. There's always been the long hereditary bloodline factor, and you guys come in, and those younger than you're separating from that reality without hallucinogenics. You're just looking at common sense and go, what the fuck's wrong with the adults? You have a lot of reasons just to put a period at that sentence, and you don't even have to answer it because you already know what the problems are. And so that's how I see that reality that's transpiring. And it's accelerating massively as we speak.
Yeah, for me, when I went into the feminine, which I assume was the sacred female, it seemed like all of the worries, all of the games, they were also service and they dissolved. And there was no, to myself, connection or worry to those things once I was enveloped within the sacred female.
And that's 100% correct. That's 100% correct. And the thing, because like they say, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, whatever. There's a thrust out and there's a pull back in. And the womb, the conclave, is the sacred female. And the outgoing is the male. It goes out and penetrates. The womb is conclave, water or orientated, that process. We do live here in this matrix in a world of equal and opposite. We do have summer and we do have winter. We breathe in and we do breathe out. The ocean waves do. We live in a night-day process reality. And once we can understand and we can work with that, then we don't fake it till we make it. Because when you fake it till you make it, the problem with that is you're never receding back into the female principle. You're always faking it till you make it. And so I come up with the philosophy, be it till you see it. It's a whole different process, because what we don't do, and what we need to do, and what we need to teach the children is we need to be able to come into the resolution within ourselves is there's going to be days that we ain't going to be waking up happy in regard to the avatar that we position ourselves to be with. You chose not only the longevity of your spirit, but you chose to come in to put up with Border's antics. It's like, you want to be Border? Let me give you a heads up on that, dude. You see? And if he don't listen to her, if there ain't a melding factor in regard, he's going to be arrogant. He's going to take on this. But you knew early on, because you were tapped by the sacred female, that the walls within you had to be broken in a manner to where there was an elongation for the greater of you. See, I saw that and I recognized that. And when Tara came in, I was like, whoa. And I know the fire in regard to the resistance, but then there's when you sleep in a manner, you come back to where it is that you were hallucinogenically. You go back into the womb and you wake up and you're in a masculine body and you're confronting society. I've done the contracts in real estate and mortgage. I know what it is to shuffle paper. And so that whole process there, we're jerked back and forth in the meditative process of what does the soul come here to orchestrate the avatar for, and how does the avatar succeed in a manner where there's rent and there's food and the inflation is high and we know it in regard to reality. So we're always in a traffic jam and the light doesn't turn green soon enough and the car in front of us stopped and we could have made it through.
As simple and as ridiculous as that little moment seems in the moment, how it can affect us in an emotional way with anger or
and it does.
Yeah.
And it does.
Yeah.
Or the retort on another, on the opinion of one, and not coming into the grace that what they're seeing is a place within them, but also the willingness for constructive criticism. The willingness for constructive criticism. See, I can look at myself as guilty of everything because people come to me and they ask me for advice, and the only reason I have it is because I've made every mistake and I don't want to see you make it, and it's only my opinion. But I have made more mistakes than anybody I can count. I mean, there ain't no reason to be still stacking these checkers up on the south side of the board. I took that down a long time ago.
Yeah, well, regarding the masculine energy, to me it felt like there is a right choice with masculine energy. It's I guess like the Marcus Aurelius philosophy of doing the right thing, right? And so there's a brotherly camaraderie of recognition of, yes, this is the right thing to do, and that's something we could live our lives in the day-to-day lives with that energy, and it could be a good thing, not necessarily like a toxic masculinity.
100%, and a masculine energy can be looked at too. It's a framework of fundamentals mathematically to where we put and we assess in regard to where we are placed, not only in history, humanity, but in nature itself. Fibonacci scale, pi, so forth. Because see, with the women, they would look at the shenanigans that we go through, the masturbation of the mind, going through the pi and the Fibonacci scale, and they're just like, why don't we just have a group hug?
Yeah.
I don't know what the deal is here. Because man's always trying to figure out through science what it is and who it is and where we're going and where we came from. And the women are like, why don't we just get along and smoke a peace pipe? I mean, really, when it comes down to it, and because they're the perpetrators and the perpetuators of human, because I was always curious, because I got raised that male's the dominant in the household and so forth. And so I always questioned it when I was in my teenage years. I had a single big question, who is? I mean, we're equal in the manner, but nature chose the woman as the perpetuation of the species. And so I just thought nature would know best, so I think that's the strongest. Then I watch a lioness who does the hunting while the lion's gloating. You watch the elk and all they do is run around and keep the little elks to themselves. I mean, the male in so many ways, he drops the sperm here and he's over there getting a lap dance and down in the strip club. So if you really just back up and go, whoa, I mean, is that really true? That's really true. They can have artificial insemination. They can do the in fetal, all of it. We can actually clone humans now. I mean, there ain't going to be a use for any one of us when it comes down to it. And the only thing that we have comprised within us is compassion and love and of sacred female in regard to. Because all the artificial intelligence, all the cloning, a lot of the medical advances are all male. If you actually look at it in regard, because the body has its intrinsic pattern to heal itself when it comes into grace within itself. You see? And so all the medical, all the surgery and so forth, that is outside of the natural indigenous Indians where they would just mix and match the herbs and they get burned on the stake for it.
And so when I was having my experience, I do feel that all of us can be connected to the male or the female regardless of gender in a sense, because one's actions can be the Marcus Aurelius actions.
100%. And what's got to be known is we have male and female within us. If you read the Kabbalion, they talk about the male-female principle within us. We have the orchestration within. We have the male-female within each identity. Now some are more, because you can have gay men that are born gay. in a male's body, so they have a different composition makeup than you and I. But in each makeup, in regard to, we have the male-female principle in the male and in the female.
Even in biology, right? Because men, we have nipples, but we don't have use for them, right? So there's a certain point where we become
on the
male,
external,
right? Right, yeah. And so that's kind of an interesting thought too, as well.
But yeah, no, it's true. And in the Kabbalion, there's one chapter on how we create, and I really appreciate in Serendipity and the Art of Impossible, agreement. You got that?
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, that agreement really stuck with me, because I feel like it's almost like going back, way back, right?
Yes.
Right, and it just felt so nice reading that's where, almost a sense where everything should be okay, right? And 'cause we're coming from a good place, and we're agreeing to everything that we're experiencing.
And agreement isn't word spoken, isn't agreement made or handshake, or is an Indian treaty, which we broke, all the white man has, look at history. Agreement is a countenance of consciousness where that tone is together in regard to the symphony and that agreement, and that creates a manifestation where two or more agree. Because I've always thought about how do things manifest. I've thought about two things in my entire life. How do things manifest from the void? And where's the origination of intelligence? I don't want to know what we've done with the origination of intelligence, and I don't want the opinion on the intelligence that was originated. I want to know where the intelligence came from, and where do you go from 0 to 1? Where do you go from 0 to 1? Because you get to 1 to 2, ain't no big fucking problem, especially to 4. That comes easy to 8, 16, 32, 64. That ain't a problem. But to go from 0 to 1, where's the origination force field in regard to? And so where I've been, I wouldn't recommend to follow in my footsteps, but I've always left it open to be wrong completely at any point, at any time, and wash it all away. Because I think already, in regard to Fibonacci scale and pi, and what we see in nature, here's how I look at it completely. That is man's own observation to put himself in a place where he can consciously reckon with what it is and who it is and what he's doing here in regard. But go ask the dolphins about the Fibonacci scale. I don't think they're studying math. So I think it's us thinking we're superior in the universe, and we can dissect and we can dialect everything in a mathematical sequence, and we can show us the nature from the pansy to the butterfly in regard to, because we're always trying to assess what the fuck over. But I don't think that nature is struggling in that manner. I think they're just in the continuity of what exists is how it is, and I'm happy in regard, and tomorrow I'm going to wake up, but it ain't tomorrow yet, and I'm awake now. That's how I see life around us. So I really see that we're in a panic situation constantly because we're always second guessing on questions that we have no need to answer, and they're not the questions in regard to where the answers lie.
We're building our own maze, right?
Correct. Our own matrix.
Matrix, right. Exactly. And that's how deep it's gotten for us. And
100%.
We're confused with it.
But you know what? All it's going to take, like the Declaration of Independence was signed by 50 signers. It only takes a small group, but even more so. It takes an elevation of a frequency to where they're not trapped in that reality, to where they're above and orchestrating apart from the body, like you do when you're on hallucinogenics. And so that butterfly effect would go around and tap. Because every time I get on a reel and I really start rocking and freaking rolling, I always think that there's somebody in the Netherlands, somebody in Australia, somebody in Africa, somebody's enjoying the same euphoric, orgasmic spirituality in regard to the frequency that I'm hitting, in and apart from the words that are spoken. We may not even agree with what it is that I'm saying, but that see, if we're both on a mescaline trip and I'm just tripping and you're just tripping, the trip's exactly different from each other, but we're still connecting the way the hummingbirds mate up there, then we're manifesting in regard. That's how I see our reality.
Yeah, it makes sense with that. And it is a vibrational factor too with that, right? Not necessarily the words spoken. Correct. It's the resonance within it.
100%. It's always that. It's always that. See, I couldn't speak forever, and I stuttered forever. And so my biggest goal was to learn how to speak. Now I'm impossible to shut up. But that was the biggest goal. I'm 70 years old. That was the end of my 60s. I just learned how to send a text on voicemail. I was like, how do I do this? Who do I talk to? What's going on? I'm talking to a rock. I never could get it through my head. I've just learned that. And so, but to be inside of my mind is really interesting dynamic, because I am just empty, and I know that I am. but I get catalyst and spark from another, and especially math or astrology will catalyst and spark me. But I just hang out here and mow the lawn.
Yeah.
It's like, I wonder if Richard's, he's solving the world, find Richard with the dog. He's not thinking nothing. He's not thinking, go down there and get lap dance. That boy don't think shit.
Well, in regards to astrology, can you explain further your perspective of it? Because when I first was introduced, at least to the word astrology, there does seem that predictive factor in things where it's pre-written or predictability. But I would just want to get more in depth of your perspective.
Oh, 100%. Yes. So August 29th, 1983, I got ran over at a stoplight. I had 11 vertebrae in my spine twisted. What happened because of that is I just blew wide open Kundalini. I could walk through walls, see through walls. Everything just was an insanity of a mess for me for years. And so what I did, because I was so confused, I wanted to be a real estate person. I just wanted to be a normal person. What I did then is but I had done it in my 20s, where I was really interested in the Bhagavad Gita. I was interested in Eastern religion. I was interested in what people thought. I didn't agree with them. I was looking to get saved. I just wanted to know what other people thought. I became highly interested in astral travel. I was super interested in psychic ability before my accident. After my accident, all I wanted to know was, I kind of like went back to the pyramid days. I wanted to know, where did all this come from and how did it come from? So I lived in Sacramento off Watt Avenue by Tower of Books, huge bookstore. And I would walk down there, and every day I would go to the oldest manuscripts, and I began reading these old manuscripts. I would sit there in the bookstore and read. I didn't have the money to buy the book. And so it was through Tarot, it was through the Kabbalah, on, and they all prefaced astrology. Every single ancient literature, all of them reference astrology. And I'm like, I don't want to study astrology. I don't believe in astrology. It's super, read my horoscope in the newspaper. I can't be known for this. I'm embarrassed to talk to my friends. Then I said, and it's all just math, and it's just a mess. So, and there was an ephemeris in the bookstore, and it's all just math. I'm like, it's impossible, but I got drawn to it. And what happened with me is I studied it for about 8 months, 9 months. I got involved in the schematics of the Pyramid of Giza, and I studied that for about 8 or 9 months. I thought I was going to lose my mind, but there's so much astrological data before I knew astrology in the Pyramid of Giza. And what happened with me is I studied it, I got nothing. None of it meant nothing. And then one day, it all just hit me. And that was a day that probably scared me more than any other single day that I've ever been released into a knowledge factor that I knew that I tapped into something from a very long time ago that I was really adept at. Because I suddenly knew everything, and it didn't matter to me. I could predict the future, I could heal, I could do miracles, and I was scared to death of astrology.
It was a tipping point for you, that moment.
100%, but it scared me because I was so psychic. I could predict and manipulate the future. I have so many stories, and heal. And I have so many stories. I don't really like to elongate on that. They're magical mysteries. They can be proven because I've witnessed in regard. Maniac and not maybe. I've tried, like Rudolf Steiner, I've tried to do my best to circumvent it because it's a scary place to actually live. But what happened with astrology, and I had to give it a lot of thought. And so I always give it thought. I've come to in regard to me with astrology, it's like, could I not believe in astrology easily? But what does astrology do for me? It's a set of mathematics that trip me psychically. That's how I see it. I look at it like this. This set of mathematics, I had Tara. I talked to you instantaneously on the phone. Off a set of mathematics, I had nothing whatsoever to go to, but your set of mathematics tripped me psychically, and I talked to you on the telephone. Now, without that set of mathematics, I couldn't have had that conversation with you. I couldn't have talked about your relationship in regard. I couldn't have said to you the things I said to you and Tara. It would have been totally, utterly impossible for me. So I look at astrology for me as a tripwire that does something in my brain magically that makes me predictable to understand the reality in multiple levels within another person. That's how astrology works for me. Now there's tropical and there's sidereal. Sidereal was given to me about 3 years ago, and I shifted 37 years of astrology from tropical to sidereal. And I work, but the Hindu, the ancient, which I wasn't even aware of, and I've only read one astrology book. I don't know any, I couldn't pass an astrology test at all. At all. I think I could teach astrology differently.
Sure.
But here's what's happened to me. And it's happened. See, astrology is called the language of the gods, the music of the spheres. I studied astrology for 20 years. I was out at night and I suddenly heard the planets. I'm a planetary whisperer. I've lived alone. I know what it is to not see a human being except to go down to Walmart there in Sholo. It's never even blinked an eye. I've never thought about it in regard. And so what I became and what I am with astrology is a planetary whisperer, because they're conscious, they're growing. There's a spirituality within them, same as Mother Earth, we can see obviously. And I see the sun as a source field. And what happened with me with astrology, oh my God, we could just talk for the rest of our life when it comes to astrology. I discovered Lionsgate, which I never knew, and I don't believe anything. They're like, oh, Richard knows everything, mind calendar. I like, man, I don't believe nothing. But I discovered Lionsgate, which is 8/8, and then I discovered, because I have my point of fortune on Lionsgate, and I discovered this way back 40 years ago, and then I wasn't putting a point of fortune on Solar Fire. And when it came back to me, because people were saying, Rich, can you talk about Lionsgate? And I said, I don't know anything about Lionsgate. And it all came back to me 3 years ago that Cyrus star is the spiritual source field of the sun. Well, I have my point of fortune over Lionsgate. So when the sun goes over my point of fortune, that's 8889 for me. And I was like, oh, I discovered this 40 years ago because I was studying a 1,000-year-old ancient astrology book, and I went through 3 days of calculations and discovered it and totally had forgotten it. That's how my mind operates. And then it'll come back. An angel came. It's a really sad, crying little book, but it's prophecy in regard to my life, because things will happen to me, and I can take you right back into an angel came that was prophesied in my 20s. That's a book of prophecy for me. It's really crazy what an angel came says. But it's really super sad because I wasn't adjusting a stranger in a strange land in regard to human, the avatar that I was presented upon, in regard to I'll volunteer and come here. There's karma and there's volunteers. And we can, because I've been dead. Being dead is the greatest. I don't recommend it for everybody, but I really think that those who could and should go through it, because you recognize there is no death.
The death experience you had, you physically were dead.
100%.
Right.
Yeah, more than, yeah, no. I've been out of body a lot and
Right.
astral travel a lot.
Right.
A lot. In fact, it really got scary to me. I was getting too far from my body. I circumvented and cut that off, and I haven't astral traveled since, not consciously. I had a near-death experience. When I came back, I could astral travel anywhere. It was just the craziest thing. I was so loosely attached to my body. All this is way back when I was a couple years older than you. So this goes really way back. And then I went through a relationship, but I always had a haunting to get back to nature, because I'm actually in society, I'm really an anxious type person. Humans, crowds, I'm really disturbed in regard to the reality of it. But I'm a believer in serendipity and miracles. And I'm a believer in, see, if you live inside of a mind where there's no walls, no boundaries, but yet you know you've got to eat in the morning and feed your dog, you know you live in a matrix of reality, you know there's certain things that we have to do in regard to, but if there's a limitlessness in regard to what can transpire at any point, at any time, globally, otherwise, personally, in a dream that we're going to have tonight when we sleep, the entirety of the world and the precipice of the ledge that we're on, and we're flying and we're splattering and the wings are appearing all simultaneously together. That's the kaleidoscope I live in. That's the happiness that I find within myself.
Well, serendipity is definitely something I've learned from you, with you talking to me and with your book, of course, and just little things like when I arrived, I flew into Salem, Oregon, and was just talking to the guy I was renting a car with. I had no plans to go to Maris Peak, but he had brought it up and he told me about it. And so I had no plans involved, and I feel like just organically having that nice human conversation, he brought that up. I go to Maris Peak, and I do the walk where humans walk, going up in the peak, seeing the views. And then on my way down, I just had a feeling of, hey, like, what if I take this trail here? And so I go into the trail, and then that's when I went into the forest. And I had that connection in that forest experience. And so I feel like without that conversational piece with that guy bringing up Maris Peak, without me feeling just just exploring, going into this forest, I never would have had that forest experience, which was great for me to have and to feel, because that was the closest I felt to nature in a long time, if not ever. And I was just by myself in this Oregon forest, hearing the crow, and it was echoing throughout, and it was so cool. It was the sound of a crow that I haven't heard, because when I hear a crow in the streets in LA, it's not an amazing crow sound, but in the forest it was like, wow, it was powerful. And just all of that, I feel like, was serendipitous in a way of me finding my way to the forest in a sense.
And you know what, I look at serendipity as space-time events. I think in my own mind, because I'm 100% always seeing the grain of sand and the beach at the same time. 100%, there's that droplet of water and it's connected to this ocean. I automatically see everything that way. The butterfly does this, and there's a hurricane over here. Gotcha. My brain simultaneously sees both of them and goes between the yin and the yang, the outward and the inward. And so I always think of space-time events in regard to serendipity. Meeting, and then I have, like you, a really mathematical, logical mind, much to my dismay. I really am calculative, I'm really mathematical, I'm really judgmental, I'm really does 2 + 2, let's get all the beans in a row, let's see what happened here. And that's where I make my biggest mistakes, in just letting be, and whatever can happen easily. But that's the masculine process, and that's the matrix that we live in, and those are the decisions that we make on a small level. But space-time events, see, that's where I learned to let go of cherished outcomes. So I'm still going forward, and I have it in the Art of Impossible. You're a Texas rancher, you're digging a well for water, or every day you're out there digging and you strike oil. Every day I'm living purposely, I'm living consciously. I ain't no great, no saint, and I don't plan on being none. I'm going up there to meet Peter, only to take him back here and have some fun with John Lennon and Hugh Hefner. Don't even think I'm walking through those pearly gates. That ain't going to happen to me any way, shape, or form. I'm saying, dude, you got to be getting tired and you got to get bored up here. Let me take you where the fun is. That's how I see my life in regard. But yeah, because I don't even categorize me as anybody that thinks I'm somebody. I see where, only because I've had it in my life so many times. So I'm basing my own theories off of the things that I've experienced and the things that I see, where I would say John Lennon and Paul McCartney meet. To me, that's a space-time event that's planned in regard. The drummer got George Best, Ringo Starr steps in, George Harrison over from India. All of it just worked. They could be John, Paul, Matthew, Mark. The 4 apostles. I mean, I see life in such a little play of a chessboard monopoly, just a game from the outside looking in, and we're all caught up in the mesmerization of, and we should be, the magic of life. But really, if once you kind of go reincarnationally, once you go hallucinogenically, once you get out of your body, once you go into the womb of the woman that you are, the woman that birthed you in regard, once you have the masculine spine that makes the choices wisely, then you can release from the avatar and you can work as above, so below. So you are the above working in regard to the moving the chess piece below.
Definitely. I feel like I tapped into
Yes, it happens.
that. Yes.
It's 100%. What happens? Yeah. And what's so crazy is that under controlled circumstances, in that manner, as opposed to alcohol and things that really do distort us. And you see, I really believe, and my hope rests on you, on the Terras, my hope on the Youngers, on the Aarons, on the Shannons. My hope, because I see it so clearly that you're unburdened by the past that we've lived through and we've suffered in regard, but I know well enough to know wherever your Achilles heel is, that's where you're going to be transmuted and transformed from. Because people say, well, the chain's the strongest, its weakest link. Excuse me, let me put it this way. The chain's also the strongest link, because the weakest link and the strongest link is the only link that breaks.
Interesting.
Strongest link, wasn't it? It's the weakest link at the same time. There's only one link that breaks. So that was the strongest, and it was the weakest simultaneously. Because the one over here that was stronger, that's holding that chain together, the strongest is right there, and they break simultaneously.
I see. Now I see.
Yeah. Yeah, we're only strong as our weakest link. That's our strongest link. And so what I've always looked at life from the bottom up. I've looked at life from the Achilles heel in regard to that repair factor. So my focus isn't on the sail up here, it's on the hole that's in the bottom of the ship. And so that's what I like about you. In regard, because you're just coming off your Corvallis, but you have the depth within you, the Piscean Ocean in regard to sacred female, and that deep dive, and you've had it since you were younger, in regard to the dark waters of the of the dark side. We have two sides. We are light and we are dark. And the light is the transformation of the darkness. You have the ability, and it's really cool that you're in a relationship with stability. You have the ability consciously, otherwise incarnationally, to go prudently into the place where Carl Jung was going in regard to psychology, psychosis, the study of schizophrenic, the study of, you asked me the question, how can human do this? That's a big question to be answered. Because once you go to unravel that question, you start going into the makeup of the morbid. You go into the psychosis of what is the underbelly of that. You're really dealing into the stake that's in the heart of the where the witches were burned. What and how could that have transpired, human to human? What is that actually could make that possible? And what I noticed right off in your birth chart, I thought, man, you have got the prudence within the makeup and the masculinity of putting the facts in a manner of safety, because Carl Jung and some of these psychologists went off the deep end. Because they went into the makeup, the morbidity they observed and obsessed in regard to, that they were wide open for entity insertion, and then they were taken on in regard to demonic possession. It happens like that. Because we are living, I mean, we look around, there's an apple tree, we see trees, I see you. We are living in a sea of elemental beings that are invisible in regard to us, but we are visible in regard to that frequency factor.
For sure, yeah.
Whether it just be magnetic frequency attraction and not choice at all.
Yeah, and we're in a spectrum, right? Our human bodies are physically tuned into a certain spectrum, but that's not to say that's all there is, right? There's so much
100%.
more. Yeah.
And the thing with that is, see, all I got to know is I don't know. See, what makes me so happy to be a part of me is I already know I don't know. And I already know if anybody did know, we wouldn't be in the mess, because the truth shall set us free. So obviously we haven't discovered what that truth is. Sure. I really do see it from that standpoint. And because I see it as the Michelangelo or the Lean, whoever painted that touch of the finger. We haven't got there yet. We haven't connected in that process to where we're at that tipping point up to where we emerge from it. Because we can't fight the Republicans against the Democrats. We can't fight against the good and against the evil. We got to emerge out of it. We're compost. We got to emerge the seeds buried in the compost, going up through the foliage to the sun that's above us.
Yeah, and I think there's a lack of awareness because we're so either propaganda in front of us or someone giving not necessarily truth, knowledge, just more so like I guess the narcissistic traits of trying to influence, right?
And there's 100% manipulation.
Manipulation,
because everybody who watched the same news channel that I watch would believe in the way so easily.
Sure, yeah.
But I do watch the news channels they watch, and it's important to me that they would believe what it is that they're listening to. I'm political. I read the Mueller report. I'm political. But I'm political from the Declaration of Independence.
Which I'm glad reading your article about that and religion
I'm political
too.
from there.
Yeah, because those were men who really came from a place of equality for all people,
yes.
right? And then, as you were saying that politicians were saying this is a Christian nation, when actually it's not, based off the Declaration of Independence itself.
100%.
Right?
Now, I will, in defense of that,
Sure.
I started getting more and more mad. And so that needs a good, strong editing. But all the quotes stand all by themselves.
Sure, sure, yeah.
The Jerry Falwell who's crossed over, and the George Bush and the Afghanistan, where all of that was really getting to me. And Jerry Falwell, there at his university, I said, let's debate. I'll debate you face to face. Get me on stage with you. Stand up and tell me I know the people that started this country. I have their quotes. I've read their books. I've read Thomas Paine, Common Sense. I know what's going on here in regard to the age of reason. And so I was younger, I had more fire in my belly, but obviously I was pretty mad at points in that manuscript. That needs to be edited and probably cleaned up, sanitized, and look like a sane person wrote it. But it was me, and I was not happy.
Sure. Well, it comes from a place of passion and fire,
Yeah,
right? And
I was angry.
To spark change, right?
Yeah, I was mad. I got run out of town. Google blew me off, and all my accounts got closed. And it was a little before its time, but its time's been a long time and a long time coming. And we're really breaking away from that. And we don't have the suppression of that because the Bible Belt and things of that nature and the dominance factor and the horrific evils that have done in the name of God. And those quotes are from King James. You can get King James and look them up because people are saying that's not in the Bible. Get a King James and look it up. That's in the Bible. And if you look at the Old Testament in that manner, that's horrifically evil. You read those quotes, it's like, what the fuck? You don't need Mein Kampf. Just read the Old Testament. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, just read it. Isaiah, just read it. And so I got raised on that. And I always knew that life was outside of that. I was never fooled to think that that's what life was.
Sure, yeah. And I feel like when the majority of people start the awareness of that we all are connected and not so blinded by their influence or media and things like that, because when I saw that documentary of Gaza, I wasn't knowledgeable about what's going on over there. And if I looked at media in the United States, it was very biased, right? Until I saw the actual footage on the ground of what these people were going through, that opened my eyes up to
Well, and not only that, what bothers me is the historic nature of Israel in regard to the Promised Land and so forth, Jerusalem. There's where I'm afflicted and affected because the Palestinians, and read, those quotes are in there, they were going in there and they were slaying everybody. They were slaying the women and the children and putting the sword through the belly, and that's just what it is, and they were fields of killing. And so the chosen ones look at the other as fodder for war and just for desecration, and they're doing the work of God. He doesn't have to come here with hellfire and brimstone. They'll just kill him in regard to the...
Yeah, it makes an excuse for terrible things.
Unbelievable.
To occur. Yeah.
And that twists the mind in a manner as to how it's possible that no matter what, how could that be possible anyway?
Sure, yeah. Where does that come from? Right.
Now, in my point of view, another day for another topic, another discussion, a podcast, YouTube, that goes back, and I school you up in regard to the 12th planet. There'll be stuff online for that, this Spirit Destiny, and the Lucifer principle is really super handy. You put those three together, and it's like, wow, is this... To me, that's the truth that I've gotten closest to in regard to the truth, because there is a blackness that I don't think is inherent in the human. Now, in the Lucifer principle, which is, I don't know why he named it that, Howard Bloom wrote an incredible book, and it talks about nature, and it talks about the chimpanzees, and we know the carnivorous nature in regard to, so there is an underbelly of desecration, dissemination, and oblivion in regard to the species within the species itself. The ants, this tribe of ants will fight that tribe of ants. And so we do really have that matrix reality checkpoint factor. But I always wonder, with that said, have we always been an equal and opposite planetary frequency factor, or was that a control factor that was put on the earth also? Because I don't know that there's always a night day in a place in regard to, because I know that blue in the color of a rainbow or purple is purple, and it don't change from blue to white to red to yellow. It's purple in that rainbow, and that's a stationary factor.
And I had never thought of that perspective until you told me that, because I've always thought of duality in a sense, because I always see it in my reality. But the spectrum factor with those colors was pretty interesting, that was kind of outside of duality in a way.
Yeah.
And so I never thought of that.
Yeah, it's a mixed match to get to there, to make to there, in the tapestry in regard to there. But the threads that go through that tapestry are identical in sovereignty unto themselves. You see? And so I've always wondered, and I've really thought, and I wrote a little book It's not published. I wrote it years and years ago because I was really curious about the consciousness of the earth and the evolution in regard to, and I will say to you, that book that I wrote, one of the oldest manuscripts from the Watchers, the Anunnaki, wasn't from man. There's a book written in regard with the same storyline. So I'm not saying I was him, and I didn't write that book prior, but I did tap into, in regard to the consciousness of where it is and how it is in regard to the sun, in regard to the solar system, because we're all a progression of evolution. Something's going to be different 1,000,000 years, 1,000 years, 100,000 years from now. And so I see this small little solar system in regard to whether it be holograph or whatever, is still a progression in regard to the evolution of it. And I do see things, everything as in an aspect of spirituality, spirit inhabitant. Mars, Venus, Earth obviously has a consciousness. So I see everything as a consciousness in regard to, and subservient to the sun, obviously, because that's a central force field of our democracy and the rulership kinship. And so I was just curious, and it just came to me. I was writing a book completely different, and I just started like tapping into something and just rolled with it. I have it probably at my place. It's a fascinating, fascinating little manuscript that I just found myself writing it. And kind of, I don't like to use the word channeling because I don't think I channel. I just think it's inert in regard to tapping into places that are inside of me that are available to me.
Sure.
Akashic records, for example.
Sure, yeah. And I've heard of those things, and I'm definitely open to those spiritual abilities, because I've been in communication with a medium, and previously to that, I never really was skeptical in a way of those things. And then experiencing that, once you at least experience it, I didn't experience it myself. I wasn't the medium, but I was in communication with a medium, confirming things that couldn't have been confirmed otherwise, right? And so the spiritual abilities, I feel like, shouldn't be disregarded or judged upon, because they can be tapped into.
Oh,
and can be
100%.
accessed.
Because everything exists can be known. That's why, at the very end of Serendipity, where I stepped on a limb and said who God is.
Yeah, it almost seemed like the book was ended, and then a couple pages in, you went on that.
Yeah.
You went on that, yeah.
Because I've always had that question: what could be, in regard to, and I believe that to be that which is not could only be that which is, that can be created in regard to, that wouldn't know of itself in regard to its identity or creation from it, that would be permeable and available in regard to the all, and it would be the null and the void, and it would come through without consciousness or judgment of. That's who I believe God is, and that's pure blown sacred female principle. That's pure blown void. In the beginning was the void. And so that's what I believe. And then it said God created from. No, God was that void, and that can be created from. That's superior to the creation of it.
Sure. And in a sense, I feel like I've had experiences where vibrationally things were kind of going in and out. And so I almost feel like the moment we're experiencing, perhaps we're tuned into a frequency to feel this reality, but there is a void within every moment that flashes away and then comes back too. And so it's almost like, in that sense, the void is always there.
And what's super crazy too, if you look at it from this standpoint, you take a yo-yo, you go down up, it stops right there at the bottom before it reverses. It's, they say in between our heartbeats, a stop. You take a teeter-totter, there's a stop. That right there, that click, that moment, that in between that process, that where the yo-yo is stopped, where the teeter-totter is flat, that process, that place, you stop that place, freeze, that's the place you can emerge from. That's the polarity where they've come into the midpoint of that reality check. And speaking of astrology, and they don't practice it much, I do completely. I take the midpoint of the opposites, the sun and the moon, the opposites, Saturn and Jupiter, Mars, Venus. I take the opposite because that's the thrust out in regard to. Astrology's unbelievably fascinating, but it's my own silence in my own mind. And then when I'm sitting and talking with another, I'm activating that process in regard to their horoscope. But what you said, we have that, the wave goes in, the wave goes out, it's stops. It literally comes to a complete still point, and that's so amazing to put that in perspective. That
Yeah.
midpoint, and that's the emergence of. That's where the male female come together, and there's no greater, there's no lesser. There's the midpoint in regard to the emergence from.
And I've heard people describe it dimensionally as like
total.
a dimension, right?
Yeah,
and,
total.
And there's other dimensions from that.
Total.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in regard to, see, dimensions are a really interesting phenomenon, series factor for me. In regard to extraterrestrial and life force in that manner of reality, I've never believed for a single second that they come from Cyrus or Pleiades or anything. And I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but I've always thought, and what I've always seen, what's been real to me, is they're interdimensionally and I've been here always. We can't see them because it's interdimensional. You blow that whistle, you can't hear it, and your dog comes running.
Right, exactly.
So I really do see it. I see things way more interdimensionally presenting themselves in this reality than I do from a far away Pleiades. Up there, that I don't even know if that's just a hole in the sky that the avatars are coming back and forth from. I don't know that isn't what it is in reality. How can they tell you the distance within a micrometer of a star system 370 million light years away, and they can't even tell you how the pyramids were built or the year when they were built in regard to. So I ain't buying none of it.
And we're limited by our senses biologically,
I ain't buying none of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I know in the 4th grade, we were doing the pyramid thing, and we were having a test, and they were showing us all the slaves carrying the rocks, and we were having a test on how to do the pyramids, and I wrote a whole thesis, how they were able to float the pyramids in the air the same way they would do the battleships on water. And I got an F on my test, and Mrs. George sat and talked to me. She knew I was special. And I said, I really believe that's how it happened. And then Edgar Casey, I pulled a book out of the library, and he said exactly, they floated it the way they do the battleships in water. They floated it in there. I said, well, how wrong was I? I was in the 4th grade.
Yeah. And that story reminds me of just when I was in film school, because they told me, you have this criteria, right? Like, make a film, tell me who you are. The project was called Who Am I? And so I made a project that wasn't, hey, my name's Border, this is what I like to do, yada yada, and I got a grade just above the passing grade, so she didn't fail me, so I could move on to the next class. But because I didn't follow the rules, and I made my film Who I Am, which was kind of experimental and like Alan Watts type philosophy.
Right.
It wasn't within the structure, and so it was like I was put upon like it was a failure in a sense, but to me it was the truth. Right.
You know what's so fun was to learn because I saw it innately, astrologically, in regard to the Kabbalion and Alan Watts, and you're like, dude, I'm on that.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, man, he put the buffet out there for us to feast on. He's the cook in the background. He's tasting them all. And so I was like, yeah, this guy's gonna work out.
Yeah, Alan Watts is cool. He was big into when I got into psychedelics. He was kind of a catalyst for me, for sure.
Yeah, you know, I really like him, and he's got his own. His ego's cool, and I really love that, his presentation in regard to.
Right.
But I really do respect that on people in their own manner, and I always think, because I'm a chameleon to where I can absorb the frequency factor, and I'm so aware that everybody's got their own struggles, everybody's got their own insecurities. I ain't a guy you can fool any way, shape, or form. It don't matter what. Because we all, I know that our human experience is, in regardless of what we appear to be, in regard to the makeup of our resume, in regard, we all have a secret source of silence within us that has encompassed sorrow. It's really super simple to see it from that standpoint. And so when you do, you're not fooled or fooled again, because you really know that everybody in the win-win struggle of, they are struggling in that regard in their pursuant. And so what does that create? For me, it's created compassion. It's created equality. Irregardless if somebody can say, well, who are you, Richard? You just sleep with a damn dog and have for 30 years, so what? You ain't greater, you ain't lesser. I don't have a car, I can't drive, how's that? But I'll tell you what, if I need to get somewhere, I will be there. You see, so my whole life is based on a premise that we are all involved, because in a puzzle piece, a 1,000-piece puzzle, they got 1,000 fucking pieces, put them all together, and everybody's going to, well, the eye of the eagle is the single most important. Get it all done. Let me pull out this blade of grass, and that's going to be the single most important piece of that puzzle.
Yeah.
And that's how I really, truly see this experience in regards to equality.
Yeah, and you never know what action you take that could affect another somewhere else.
100%.
Right?
You see, I got really lucky because I have friends overseas in the Philippines, and they're so gracious and in regard because they got to walk to the stream for their water. And so But not only that, when I was little and watching the Holocaust films, my heart broke, and I was in an incredibly abusive environment, but my heart broke so much for those little kids that I seen transported on those trains in those black and white, the Holocaust, Germany, and that's to this day has made a massive impact on my life, those black and white grainy films. And whenever I'd wash dishes and whatever, I'd always save some water for those little kids with those eyes that were glazed and hollowed. It never left me. That's a really sad story from a guy who was abused as much as me as a child, but I still live with that, and I still live in regard to the compassion, the equality, and I look what's happening over here in Springville with the Haitians. To me, that's just an atrocity, and how could we be there in regard to politically the way that the way that they use that in regard to the media, so forth, Palestine, Israel. You line them up in the same freaking wall, you don't tell anybody where they came from, you're not going to know the difference. They all have the same color skin, they all look just identical. And not only that, the kids born from the parents in regard to across that wall in Gaza or there in Israel would play it together in the playground without any single fucking question.
Sure, yeah.
And so what's so difficult about that?
Right, and it's the fact that we got to the point where we are that is occurring is just, again, like way back then, which please educate me more on it. Send me stuff like
yeah.
way
Oh
back.
man,
Where
you're gonna
does
be
that
fun.
come from?
Your audience is gonna be fun because I've gotten to a point where there's a couple like the Lucifer Principle is an amazing book on the psychology, mob psychology, and answering the questions: how could we go into morbidity? It's an easy and fabulous read, and the chapters, and it deals in nature. Mother Nature's a bitch. It deals, and from memes to genes. It's like, well, the book was kind of in front of its time, but it's really psychology, and it's really just dialed in so many manners. So you read that, you just brush up on the Stitchkin's work of 76 with the Anunnaki. That's a quick read right there. You go, oh, because it says in the Bible, when the sons of God came upon the daughters of men, it's right there. In the giants, and when there were giants prior, in the Mormon literature, in all Eastern religion. So that's a real, it's like, click, hybrid, you're kidding, is this really real? So you kind of get that inbred, and then you read the Spirit of Destiny, and it really gives you the as above, not fighting against flesh and blood in Revelation, but principality of evils, how Hitler was able to come to the power that Hitler came into. Because that little scrawny little motherfucker would have kicked his fucking ass. And I remember thinking in the 4th grade, what if he was in my lifetime? And I never could figure out how the Germans could have been fooled by that until I read The Spirit of Destiny. And that just opened up. I mean, I was aware of the principalities of evil in regard, but I never saw it politically from that standpoint, and that makes this earth a really scary place with AI intelligence, to where can we go into a one world government? Can we go into dominance and control? Can we go way back in history to where we were nothing but food source and slave source? Yes, we can, and that is a fact in reality, but I don't think it's going to happen, because I think we're in a translucence, and I see it through astrology, to where we're in a looking glass to where we can see the other side in regard to what our actions are going to create in regard to the reaction of. And what's happening is there's so much instant karma that's happening now, politically and otherwise too. It's instant karma. Putin struck Ukraine, used to be part of the mother country. I understand in '89 what transpired. Struck Ukraine, it backfired on him. He thought he would take it in a day. Look at this back here. And the Israel-Palestine thing, that's probably a real reality, because you go back biblically and so forth, and there's the heathens and there's the chosen ones. Well, that shit's going to all hit the wall and splatter. Because the little kids that finally do grow up and they have a sandbox that they can play together, and they don't recognize the skin color any way, shape, or form. They don't recognize the religious or the hatred and the bigotry where they've come from. They're going to buy that story that Santa Claus, and his fat ass is going to come down your chimney. It ain't happening.
Right, and we both shared off camera our disappointment in realizing Santa Claus was...
I was in the 4th, I think it was in the 5th fucking grade. It's the only thing I had left to believe in. And then all my classmates laughed at me, the stupid person that I really am.
Yeah, and well, it's so sad just knowing that, because there was such a magical essence to it, and then it's like the magic was stripped away in a way.
But I've put that in perspective too, because kids, especially ones that are psychic and ones that are loved, they do have past life memory, and they have psychic ability. And ain't it crazy that they short circuit those stories, and they force feed them the Easter Bunny, the Santa Claus. They force feed them these huge lies that there's no truth in regard. Because I've always thought to myself, it's almost unconsciously permeated upon a child. You get them to believe that big lie, which is a huge lie. Santa Claus, let's be real, from the North Pole in every chimney, he's going to come down. Huh, that's a pretty big lie. And so I've thought about the Easter Bunny too with the Easter eggs. That's a pretty big lie. So will you get the kid pliable to the big lie when the big lie comes, the election being stolen, and all these things that happened with the Germans back in World War II, the big lie. And Hitler said it's easier to make him believe in a big lie than a little lie. So let's just start him out with Santa Claus.
Interesting point.
I've actually thought about that. And the interesting thing in regard to Santa Claus, in regard to the 12 reindeer, the 12 disciples, and 12 of the 12 seasons, mathematically there's a lot of reality in regard to sacred geometry. The way that we assess our ability to look at the framework that we do through the human reality eyes point factor. But think about this. We are evolving, we're changing. Our eyes look differently because back 150 years ago, there was a stagecoach without a horseless carriage beside it. So the way that humans' evolutionary process, the vision board that they're looking at and the reality that they're comprised of around them, the city blocks, the traffic lights they go through, everything's shifting in a new reality that can come out from the impregnation of artificial intelligence with the natural attribute to be in a symbiotic relationship with Mother Earth. I could be wrong. It's really easy to hit that button and have nuclear warheads all over than it is for me and my little belief in Jesus and the Beatitudes and the Sermon on the Mount. I'm on the losing end of the team. It's going to take a Hail Mary and get your ass down here, little one, because we need you badly, and bring Mary Magdalene along with you.
Well, if anyone taps into that Christ consciousness or that loving energy within themselves, then that can be avoided as a collective.
100%.
Right? Yeah.
100%. And the way that happens is through the Mycelium Network.
Right.
You see, and the YouTube channel. If you think about it from that standpoint, it's like, whoa, what was that about? Click, click, because that's inner, that's dormant, that's now. And it's evolution to where the tipping point, the time has come. Nothing stronger than the idea whose time has come. And so we're on a conveyor belt that's moving in. You know, and it's equal and opposite because we've got the polarity of the opposite factor. Hit the nuclear button and watch this, and we'll solve this problem. Burn it down, Samson, Temple Waltz, boom, blind me, I'll show you. You follow me from that standpoint.
Yeah.
So if you really, see, I just have an objectiveness and I have a sentiment in regard to the Sermon on the Mount, but I know that nuclear button can on Ukraine, as we're speaking, could be happening on the news tonight. And so there's a real reality, and the only thing that I'm in a belief system in regard to is a mycelium of the underbelly of consciousness of the newborn that aren't born yet, and those of us that are watching Roe versus Wade getting turned over, especially my generation, because I'm an abortion survivor, everything but the coat hanger. And so I know where I grew up, and in regard to a woman's freedom of choice, and they start taking away and they start pressing Project 2025 with religious doctrine, there's that whoa, haven't we done this before? There's that dog that you hit and you still adopt it, but you go fast and it's still going to pull its head back. See, we've already been through. We're not looking for another hero. We played that movie. We will not be fooled again. So that's a retraction in regard to one. They're backing off. Wait a fucking minute. And so that back off creates that void and that translucency that you see right through. And that's how it's happening in my point of view.
Cool. Well said. We only got 90 minutes. I don't know how long we've been talking, but yeah, I guess you can check that. But I know it feels like we always could talk forever and go on.
I got an hour and 24 minutes, but it's fun. We can turn it off. This is good. We can rock and roll. Commercial break. Lap dance. No, you're married. You're married, right?
No, not married.
Then I keep getting confused about that. I'm like, yeah.
At some point, for sure.
Yeah.
You know, I've had the recognition.
But I was thinking when I met you,
yeah,
there in Williams, that Nellie introduced me as you guys were married. I'm glad I asked. I was wanting to because I'm like, I don't even really know for sure if they are or they're not.
No, not married, but I have the recognition that Tara has come into my life and is the one for me because I know that I've become a better person going through even the struggles of being in a relationship with
and you know what we can do on another day and use for editing purposes? Oh man. I've done unfortunately so much relationship counseling. It's really a drag on me, but you guys got such a top side and I could really bounce off you that other people could hear in regard to, and you're really, you as a man are really cool with me because I know Aaron is too, though. Don't get me wrong. Aaron's really cool, but he's just not quite on board to the advice that I give him in regard to the decision choices he should make. You're a guy that, the way you tipped me was when you said, and we can get down and dirty. I'm like, you're on. Because this guy, but I have you astrologically too, but anytime that masculine man to man, Richard, who the fuck is he? Now you're talking about my wife. Wait a minute. We're all real in this play, and if you're working to make it work, I'm really working with you to make it work. Because what happens in a relationship is you come together, you're evolving as an individual identity within yourself, you're coordinating with another, and your time frames aren't the same. Because the spiritual growth within you, whatever growth she's going through, isn't a compatibility in regard to the identity of the isolation. So that recognition of we're not exactly on the same path, but we're on the same path. You're going to go around this mountain, but we're headed to California because that's where the gold is. We're coming off from Massachusetts. We dropped off the piano, and I got to go hear the stream because the horse got loose in regard. We'll see you on the other side. And so if you keep it going like that, going, wow, you made it to here, you made it to here. Because people try to jump in the same, you on a roller coaster, you're in your seat. You can't have two in that. And so when you go through and you know in their symbiotic relation to get to the other side, you may not understand, but you're in support of. Sure. And so you have that trust in regard to, and that's where a man, the male principle backs off and allows a woman to be, because we can't understand, because the next time you're pregnant, let me know.
Yeah. And in regards to Tara, I would have never been introduced to you, so then this wouldn't have occurred. So you don't know exactly where you're being carried to with exactly and what opportunities are out there in a sense.
That is
right.
So, and she came from Nellie.
Right,
Nellie's
exactly,
an angel.
yeah.
It's really rare to find an angel.
Right.
And I remembered when Nellie had told me about her long before that I ever talked with her, way back when she was just talking about Tara. Yeah. And so when Tara came across, I'm like, oh my God, that's Tara. I just loved her instantly through Nellie.
Yeah, and you knew about Tara too.
100% through Nellie.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And so I was like, rock and roll, let's have their family. You know, here. I'll charge you a session, and so that goes over here. We're going to rock it up. I know, because I heard your voice. We're going to rock it up. Yeah. And so then I was studying your birth chart, and I was like, yeah, man, this guy can go deep. And then you were validating it. And in regard to relationship, you're new in regard to that. And there is so much knowledge that we can just bounce off and have a good, incredible time, the three of us, in regard, and just interact, because you guys are, I can explain your third mind horoscope is just, and it's not a person, it's an energetic frequency. It's a magic of a moment that doesn't have an avatar or human attached to it. That's a frequency. It's like, boom, that creativity. And I really meditated on that, because to me, it's such a burst of light.
And that frequency I tapped into during the psilocybin experience.
100%. It's a burst of freaking light.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, you guys. Yeah. It's a burst of light. And I can see that burst of light to where it's blinding, and I can also see where it really is explosive when it is. I can see it's explosive in regard to where you would get tipped under and she would explode in regard. I'm like, whoa, there is a tempering factor, but there's a high creative force field. And when I had talked with Tara, I keep bringing it up, and I wish it was recorded. Man, I'm just rocking with this chick. She's so fun. It was so elevatory. It was so laughing. It was so in regard. And I was kind of going over her head to see where she could follow or not. But she's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm understanding this. I'm like, man, we're just doing it, girl. We're just doing it. And then it wasn't until the end that I found out it was a doctor, and that's why she wanted to be a nurse. But I took it through this whole universal compassion of the sacred female in regard to the healing of another. And then I discovered it was in the grid line in regard to the family expectation honor, and her doctor had been her brother a doctor.
Well, so and Tara recently had a tarot card reading, and of course you don't know necessarily. I'm not well versed in tarot or someone who's giving it. I like to get suggestions based off someone I've had experience with, right? So if you suggested someone who knows tarot, then I know tarot.
Really super good. I can give you a whole story about that, but go ahead.
But cool, yeah. So Tara got a tarot reading recently, and she said that her and I would be working together in a sense.
Boom. I know it. Yeah.
Okay.
And so let's just put that. I have no tarot outcomes, but I do have. I know where the gold lies. I'm a minor because I'm not psychic, but I have what you call it, where it does on the ground. It's like, man, you're just psychic. No, I ain't psychic. This is called
like a radar kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Because I know in regard to just doing this kind of stuff, podcast, Zoom, we get them out on TikTok. We just put them out there, just let them land wherever they do. We can go to pseudonym, it don't matter in regard to, put it on the small pause account. It don't matter to me because I know enough about me when I connect in reality, this high source field frequency, it's going to go viral. There's no question about it. I got 150,000 views in just getting my hair cut on a 30-second video without even a picture of my face.
Sure. Yeah.
And that to me would just happen when I lived here. I knew right then that my time was coming. And I thought, I keep going back to that Tara conversation. I'm going, because she was wanting nursing, and I was like, we had to just record a little bit. Let's get Border in on this. And you guys in relationship, because your energy factor of the third mind would be the horoscope that I would read from. And so so it's not individually synchronistic in regard to your identity, but you're really reaching through and up in regard to a higher place within you, into that soul source of a longevity of a relationship. Because so many people really want their relationships to work good. And once you understand that we come together to test each other, we come together for the sovereignty and individuality of each other, and we come together to make ourselves better as an identity of an individual in countenance of another, in two horses pulling, but we're still in our own harness. If you see it like that, that the wagon behind, and then you see in the longevity of family, social circles, career orientation process, and did I see that with you and Tara? Absolutely. I definitely have that feeling, but I have it based solely on astrology because it's such a bright light. It's such a combustion. It's like the finale of the fireworks, to where it's just, whoa, what the hell? That's that third energetic process. I was just mesmerized by it. It ain't a person. You know, I can't imagine it being enveloped in a human being. It'd be too much chi, too much kundalini, too much of that expressive, explosive force.
And so when Tara and I's relationship, we just roll with the punches that we learn from it, and we just go, we don't try and have a picture in mind and expectation, we just let it flow.
Oh, I know, you guys are amazing at your age, and you're such a beacon of what can be, what is, in regard to the allowance of what transpires.
And it's not easy.
No.
Yeah.
Oh no, I can see, and not a, here's why I know it's not easy, because the individual makeup of you is really fucking super different from each other.
Right.
You and Tara don't have shit in common when it comes to the ingredients in regard to the metabolics of what made when the molecules and atoms were placed together. You guys are really, and that's where that growth factor comes, because you guys have really super different personalities. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes for the magic of. That's what makes for the combustion for.
Cool.
That's what it is. That makes it possible.
The two becoming one.
Yeah. Yeah, because puzzle pieces, they got nothing in common. How can they clasp together? Because they're opposite from each other. That's why.
Exactly.
That's why they clasp together. And so what happens is people will come in fleetingly and they blow apart. But see, that's why I'm so promotional in regard to the relationship, the understanding of the questions that could be asked. And you don't have to ask questions, because I'll just present the postulate. And then for those of you, your audience, and audience older than me, to hear it in regard, and you look back in your memory and think, God, that's all we had to do was let go, to let be, to become that which we don't know, but we'll find out and embrace when it gets here. And you guys have that. You guys really, and not only you guys have that, a lot of people are really not wanting the dominant and submissive, they're wanting the equality of. They know that when it's right for you to drive and I'm tired and I'm sleeping in the back seat, the car is going to be fine and not hit the guardrails and run off the freeway.
And I've learned from myself, going to LA was a selfish decision on my part. It wasn't Tara's decision. And I've learned from that too. And so I feel like with that, my own personal struggles and realizations, Tara has been by my side too, and with
amazing.
that, right?
Yeah, and she's allowed you to go into yourself and see the places within you to where you can embrace in regard and not be in blame of. And so she's been unconditional in regard, knowing you're just a fucking idiot.
She has been not very judgmental,
Where you
previously I would have thought.
You would have thought that.
Yeah.
Because I'm aware, because we have a real similarity in that detail orientation.
Right.
In regard to punctuation and editing. our life in regard to how that is an ingredient that we share, much to our demise. It brings us out of present time. But with her, what I saw so beautiful in regard was that unconditional embrace, to let you allow yourself to go into the place where it is that you're questioning, but she's still there with you. In regard to unconditional, it don't matter, it's going to be fine, and just, hey, what the fuck over. I was thinking too it'd be differently, but it's not, but we still love each other.
Yeah.
And so you're like, whoa, really? I'm not, that's not what I'm used to.
Right.
I mean, wait, aren't you supposed to start yelling and talking about bills now? What the fuck? I'm borrowing money. No,
Sure,
yeah,
sure,
but see, that's what I try to share with people. Because we come to life, wherever the Achilles heel is, wherever it is possible to be broken, we're going to be. Because once that breaking transpires and the horse is out of the corral, how's it going to get there? By breaking through the fence. And so there's another fence it's going to bump into to break through from. And so it's like, is that really what life is all about? All you do when you're climbing a ladder is just have another ladder rung to go up. I'm sorry to give you the big heads up that you don't get to the top.
Yeah, right. It's a process, an evolution.
Yeah,
continuing.
Yeah, it don't end somewhere.
Yeah.
You think when you die, what? No, you don't have a clue. You're going to be glad you're out of here. That's for starters, and then you'll want to volunteer and come back because you were such an idiot the first time.
Well, in my psilocybin experience, I feel like I had the birth experience, which was the womb, right, and the egg, and then at the same time the death experience going back to that womb. So it almost reiterated. One could say reincarnation in a sense, but going back to the source, where at the end of your life, where it started.
Right.
So that's for me at least. My
Oh,
perspective
you know,
of the
and we can have this, and I want to elongate on that, because that's coming up, especially in your Saturn return. That happens over the next years, and dovetail into evolution and dovetail into relationships, because really, when it comes down to it, all the answers lie in regard to the equality of the sacred male-female principle and the unification between the two to make for the procreation of. There's no greater, there's no lesser, there's equality, but we do exchange places in leadership. And so, because all it is the two to get together to make for one, that sovereign within itself to come into union with another, to be coalesced together to make for that to continue on forward. See, we're just birthing a new species in regard to the consciousness and what's going to transpire in regard to. See, we're just a computer that has all the energy taken out, and we're upgrading. We're still going to look the same like a human being, but then going to be nothing similar in regard to the past, where we come from.
Cool.
So I know that we're going extinct in that manner.
Well, eventually all things come to an end, right? Or they come to their ending point.
Yeah, they transmute, they transform.
Yeah.
It's all transforming. Yeah. You see in these, like they shapeshift. That's what it is.
Sure, and even Marcus Aurelius was saying how famous people in his time, he was naming off names I've never heard of, but in his time he was like, at some point, they're not going to be famous. The civilizations they 100%. Built are going to collapse.
And what's so great about Stoicism from that standpoint, and you're good at this, you'll get, especially the natural curves of evolution, the Saturn return, so forth, the biological ingredients that happen in regard to the change of the guard within us, adolescence, pre-puberty, we have the change of the guard that happen in the growth factors, in the way that the humans are built. You'll have fun with life in a Stoic reality checkpoint factor, to where you're watching a movie that you're the director of. You've also made the script, and you're sitting here in the audience. So you'll have that ability to bounce back and forth in your reality, because we're comprised of multiple subjects within ourselves, that we are every piece on the chessboard, and we're the player moving those pieces. And if you play chess, do you?
Not much.
Okay.
I played it in the past.
But you know what chess is then?
Yes.
Okay, the single most, because we think about the king, which is worthless. The queen is amazing on a chessboard.
The moves it can make versus the king are
yeah, that's pretty real in life, but the most powerful being is the pawn, because it can transform itself. Once it gets to the end of the line, nothing's more powerful than the pawn. Think about that in the reality of where we are in regard to the 100th monkey, in regard to subservience, in regard to the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount, in regard to the meek shall inherit the earth. Nothing's more powerful than humbleness, humility, and in the grace of strength and ability. That's where the little stone, because we ain't David, we ain't the slingshot, we ain't Samson, we ain't the forehead, we're the stone that's being thrown. That's where we are in this little place right now.